Hey there, YouTubers and gamers of all ilk. I'm Right Nerd, this is Left Nerd. And today on WebDM, we're gonna be talking about the dingoes of D&D, so look out for your baby while we rag on hags for a little bit. Let's get to the haction. So Jim, hags.
Hags.
What are they good for? Absolutely nothing. No, sorry.
What are hags good for? Hags are good for if you're looking for a tier 1 monster that is going to be the anchor of your village-themed or wilderness exploration, campaign. I highly recommend that you consider the hag as your villain.
Yeah. Now, long term.
Long term,
well,
some of the hags
moderate,
but definitely from levels 1 through 5, sort of the first tier of play.
Yeah.
A hag is a great, just a great monster for village level D&D.
Yeah.
Which that's what I consider low level D&D for. I mean, like there's always you kick off a game in like the big city and then crawl around the sewers and everything, but there's something about like the itinerant group of problem solvers that travel between little villages.
Mm-hmm. These isolated
communities, exploring the wilderness in between them, that the hag makes a good villain for that setting. All of them, taking all 5 hags, both the ones from Monster Manual and from Boles, they all have a common theme of they just like to make life miserable for the people in their vicinity.
Yeah.
And they each do it in a different way. But they just love spreading pain and misery and suffering and then watching the ripple effects of what these regular people, these poor people, these commoners that live in the D&D world have to deal with. That's why I think they make a good foil. So, for example, the players enter into a region, something weird's going on, maybe the wildlife's acting funny, a lot of strife in the village, people hate one another, a lot of blood feuds, and just petty grievances that spiral out of control, discord and a lack of harmony. That should tip the players off and be like, wait a second, shouldn't be this bad. Something's going on. Right. Maybe there's a hag somewhere who is, say, impersonating people around town.
Trying to get all those soap opera storylines in there.
Exactly, except with
the uncle getting the niece pregnant with the whatever's baby.
Except it usually ends with one of them being kidnapped and eaten by this monster.
Well, yeah.
It's just what happens. So one of my favorite video games of all time, Witcher 3, heavily features hags. Of course, they're a different take on the monster, but it's basically the same thing. You enter one of these villages, they need the Witcher to help clear out a monster. It's invariably a hag who's stealing, cadavers from the graveyard or messing with travelers just outside of town. So that's the kind of D&D that I really like to see hags in. Now that said, I'm not as impressed with them mechanically as I would like to. I like the concept of hags. I like using them as a main monster. But I look through their entries in the Monster Manual and I'm like, I just want a little bit something else. Yeah. So I probably would always modify or tweak a hag. From the baseline stats in the Monster Manual.
Okay, well let's lay down the baseline here. Let's start going through each of these. So the Annis hag. This is just your kind of standard hag.
Yeah, it leans heaviest towards being a melee monster. Yeah, and so it's got the hit points. Armor class isn't amazing. It's got hit points and particularly the melee attacks that make it a kind of just a brute that you can use in combat like that. However, you shouldn't feature this monster alone. What I like about the Annis hag is this idea that there's a monster out there who collects all the other monsters and says, you know what, let's just join into a big, happy, murderous family. Right. And it's got, the Annis hag's gonna have ogres, trolls, maybe a clutch of goblins that it's brought under her wing, bugbears, things like that. All these little outcast monsters that might inhabit a wilderness that don't otherwise have a leader. An Annis hag can become that leader and sort of then is their mother or their auntie or something, and then provide them organization and structure, which is what makes them truly dangerous.
Yeah. Now I'm just imagining a bunch of goblins running around going, Auntie Hag, Auntie Hag, Auntie Hag, Auntie
Hag. They pick their teeth clean of the children that they've eaten.
Well, yeah, because they're going to take your baby.
They're going to take your baby.
Just keep a lookout for that. Right. Not sure what you're going to do about it.
So particularly with the Annis hag has an ability where she can pluck out one of her iron teeth and give it to a child, and that sort of establishes this connection to that child. And so, I mean, what if you lived in a house with a murderous toddler who is actively trying to kill you? What if your village was plagued by children who perform and who try to pull off deadly practical jokes because of one of these creatures that's infested them?
And children of the corn.
Right, and so that poses an interesting challenge for the players who show up to solve that problem. How do they deal with a bunch of murderous children?
Are they still children?
Are they still children? Do
you just kill them?
Do you just kill them? Right. That is an issue that can come up because of the way hags are created. As explained in the Monster Manual, the hag consumes a child. It's a little vague on the details, thankfully. And so it's up to the DM to kind of work that out. But yeah, it might be that this creature that's born out of this murder and the pain and everything else that becomes a hag just exists to spread more of it. Right. And so the Annis hag is a classic hag in that sense. I can imagine an encounter on, say, a foggy hillside or a wooded glade or some kind. They don't have a lot of magic in and of themselves outside of being a part of a coven. So it's not that you're going to rely on a lot of magic with them. But you might say throw down a fog cloud in the midst of the melee so that the hag can sort of like isolate individuals in the party and not everybody can see exactly what's going on, particularly if there's a couple of ogres and trolls in there. Now you have 3 or 4 big, burly, large brutes that are coming in. Are we fighting the ogre? Are we fighting the troll? Are we fighting the hag? Where did our ranger go? You know, who made off with the wizard? That kind of thing.
Yeah. He just skipped town.
Yeah, the fog clears and you're missing a party member.
That's chilling for sure, if you'll forgive the use of the pun for segue.
But it's a good segue.
Let's get on to the bheur.
Bheur. All right, so I know that we kind of covered this in our Boles guide review. We're going with the bheur pronunciation, both thematically and for ease of pronunciation.
Yeah, so if that's wrong, you can blame the people in the comments that were like, hey, it's like that, like you're cold.
Sounds like this. I still like Frost Hag. These are sort of one of the few on their own spellcasting hags that we get. Now, night hags, all of them have some kind of spellcasting ability. But the bheur hag has the most.
Right.
And it's really thematic. The Volo's entry mentions that they basically wait for winter to come out and make life miserable for the villagers, like summoning blizzards every day.
Right.
And watching those villagers starve to death in their homes. What do they do when it gets that bad? I can imagine a bheur hag doing something similar, but with a pack of winter wolves that it's allied with, that are infesting the woods around this village. And so the PCs arrive and like, yeah, we fought a ton of wolves getting in here. And then all the inhabitants are snowed in, huddled, terrified, scared, and then it's like, okay, we're being picked off by one of these hags who's trying to really do nothing more than make their life, like the pain and suffering they cause is to no further end other than their own delight.
Right. I mean, that's all they have.
That's all they have. And so that's what makes all of the hags interesting, but particularly these ones that have the capacity to truly make life miserable for people.
Right, because I mean, you know,
they torment.
You isolate towns, you know, in your average D&D setting.
Right.
You know, towns might not be that far apart. Like you were telling me the other day, like
right,
up where you're living.
So up where I'm living, I had the opportunity to experience like a New England winter, and I was told it was pretty mild, but coming from Texas, any amount of snow is more snow than I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, it's Snowmageddon.
Right,
yeah.
And so I can imagine, like, first off, it's a huge pain to deal with. You never really realize how bad having ice cover everything is until you try to walk down a sidewalk. And so what would that be like trying to walk down a dirt road that's frozen, full of ice? I mean, it's like these villages, even though they might be just 3 or 4 miles away from each other, because of the winter, and they're really, truly isolated.
Right.
So any one of these places could be, you know, help could be less than a day away.
Yeah.
But no one can get out of the village. Everyone that has tried to flee is eaten by wolves, chased down.
Exactly.
The bheur hag gets them and then starts feasting on while they're still alive. Right? That's the kind of environment that I would use these in. And to me, I like them because it's like they're not just a monster.
Right.
They come ready-made with adventure hooks there and ways that they interact with the environment around them. And if you're planning your D&D campaign, you need to think of your monsters in that way. It's the environment, it's the NPCs, it's the monsters that you have. All 3 of those things combine to make the environment that your characters are going to play in and that you're going to present to the party And if you just take some time to think about how all of those things interact, that's what makes the game really unique and rich and different from video games and other forms of entertainment that kind of compete for your attention. This is why you're playing D&D. It's not just a monster that you go in its lair and beat up. It exists in the world and interacts with the things around it. Maybe the villagers placate one of these hags in order to avoid having a blizzard come down every winter and then be picked off.
They move into town. Everybody seems a little dodgy, you know. Everybody seems on edge.
Suspicious.
They're stressed out. But when the party asks, "Oh no, everything's fine." Well, why would you say anything?
Why would you think that? Well, first off, you don't know if you're talking to a party member or the hag, right? So I mean that's the thing with all of them. And sort of moving on to the green hag, pretty much the only thing the green hag has going for it is the fact that it can appear however it wants. It can sound like however it wants. And so this is why working in more than just visual sensory descriptions as a DM is important. Because if the only time you mention the sounds in your environment is when they're different or wrong, then it's going to tip the players off. So if you just sort of like work in your everyday, trying to hit all 5 senses as much as you can and describing the environment and the interactions, then when you start, when you have a hag like a green hag, where sound and mimicry, those kinds of things are how they lure people in, it's not going to look out of place to your characters.
Right.
Or to your players, sorry. They're not going to go, oh, the DM's describing something, I must interact with it.
Yeah.
That can sometimes happen when you DM. The green hag are they're trickers. They're tricksy themselves.
Yeah.
They can look like whatever they want to look like. They can look like your best friend. They can look like your neighbor's wife.
Yeah.
They can look like whatever, and that's how they cause their mischief.
Right. So I mean, these hags are going to be a little bit more directly interactive as opposed to just creating an atmosphere and environment around a village. They're actually going to get in.
They're actually going to get in there.
Start sowing that discord face to face.
Absolutely. They might live in the village part of the time as, say, the village gossip or the village healer or the village something. Maybe they're indispensable in some way that the villagers don't realize exactly who's there amongst them. Or maybe they're on the hut just outside of village.
Yeah.
And sometimes the apothecary's there, sometimes she's not.
Oh, she's out gathering...
She's out gathering whatever. You can also take those expectations and turn them on their head. Maybe the apothecary is really just an old woman who lives on the edge of the village, and when the players come in and they're like, oh, she must be a hag.
Right.
Then you'd be like, no, she's not. And you can play on their expectations and make them feel bad for murdering innocent people.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's going to be your first red herring of their Law and Order HAG.
Yes.
But the Green Hag is a lot more interesting to me in that regard because it provides a little bit different of an RP experience where you can weave this insanely complicated set of events where somebody's cheating on someone and whatever, but they don't remember saying this thing to whoever.
Yeah, and then it's up to the PCs to unravel them. That's a good idea for combining,
something more RP based.
For DMs looking to have both social, environmental exploration, and combat encounters, having it be that this village is in a tizzy, about to boil over, because of the actions of a hag. So now it's up to these social PCs, those who've invested in intimidate and charm or persuasion, insight, deception, to talk to these NPCs. What's going on? Figure that out. Now we got to go find this hag. That's where the exploration comes in. You've got to navigate the wilderness, the terrain features that are going to be in the way, the environment that the hag has placed themselves in, and then it ends in a combat encounter with the hag. That's how you include all 3 pillars of play in an adventure like this.
Right.
And why the hag's ability to mimic creates the opportunity for a social encounter that you might not otherwise have if it was another type of monster.
I love it. Well, let's head out to sea.
Heading out to sea, the sea hag is much like the green hag. The environment changes a bit. They live in underwater layers, shipwrecks, abandoned coves. Remote islands that nobody visits. They're supposed to be the most hideous of all the hags. So
they'll have barnacles and whatever hanging off them.
Seaweed and fish guts and all that other kind of gross bits. Their MO is basically the same. Make life miserable for the people around them. So perhaps the hag appears as a castaway washed up on shore, and they're using that sort of feigned helplessness as a way to lure in someone. Or they appear as a mythical mermaid, something to lead sailors into some rocks where they then cause shipwreck or something like that.
Right. Cause it to run aground and then.
Right. They also have one of the few death effects in the game. So they have a frighten ability, and then if you're frightened by it and you view the hag, you then have to make a save or drop to 0 hit points. So it's one of the few death effects. The save DC is a little low, which is why I think like throwing a sea hag at a party of say 2nd or 3rd level characters is going to make for a memorable encounter. It's tough, and it does good melee damage, and so you can, before the players get a bunch of extra attacks and before you need monsters that have multiple attacks, you can use one of these monsters at that low level. Maybe it's accompanied by some fish folk or some other kind of aquatic monster that it's brought up from the deep. Or maybe you try to fight it in its lair and it's partially submerged. You're having to deal with the murky water, the seaweed, the debris that's in there. Anything we've said about the other hags probably applies to the sea hag as well. They make life miserable for people. For villagers that live by the sea and have to make their living from traveling in the sea, having a sea hag infest a lair somewhere nearby is going to probably really ruin everything that they everything that they rely on.
Yeah, because at that point, all your fishermen go out to sea to fish for the day, and they keep coming home, and their nets keep getting cut for some reason.
Their nets are cut.
And all of a sudden, they don't have any food, and they try to send for help, and the ship runs aground, but they don't know about it.
They don't know about it, yeah.
You can really isolate,
you can
in
really
a different way.
Yeah, maybe the sea hags allied with a group of marrow that that sort of torment and act as their allies. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with the sea hag, including having it just be sort of a part of a triad of if the Annis hag represents hills and mountains, the green hag forests and swamps. The sea hag is the the rivers and the coastal regions.
Last but not least,
our favorite hag, the night hag, the hag that went fiendish. You have some special thoughts about the night hag that you most recently encountered. Yes.
Oh yeah, you mean Razzle Sin?
Talking about Razzle Sin.
Yeah, she can suck it. That's it's just endlessly frustrating is what they are. They are endlessly frustrating, even because we're what, 8th level?
Yeah, 8th or 9th level in that campaign.
It's a little bit step up.
Right.
Having to deal with I'm not gonna kick a door. I promise, Trav. I'm not gonna kick a door.
You're not gonna kick a door open. So the night hag is incredibly slippery between plane shift and etherealness. They have a lot of tools to get away.
Yeah.
For the players out there, some of those abilities are tied to items that the night hag has on them. So they're sort of custom magic items just for the night hag. So there is a way, at least, to prevent them from constantly getting away. You can take those items from them. This is sort of where you're needing to interact with a monster and learn more about it, as opposed to just like kick down the door and kill it or try to.
Right.
That the approach of sort of taking like, all right, well, let's figure out what we're up against. And some campaigns don't have that. There's a time crunch or some kind of element that prevents a lot of long-term reconnaissance. But if you have that opportunity, taking the time to be like, okay, we're dealing with a night hag here, right? We got what's in its soul bag. What about that hearthstone that it has? Does it have anything else? All hags should probably have some kind of like scrolls, potions, wands, things like that. The Volo's Guide chapter on hags is, if you haven't read it, it's a great resource for expanding your hag encounter. So I'd highly recommend it there. But night hag is just, they're my favorite of the hags because it's like they're so evil that the rest of the hags were like, you got to get out. Like, we just don't even want you here. You're going to be banished to Gehenna or Pandemonium or whichever one, the Grey Wastes, one of the lower planes. They stay there, then they get involved with the Yugoloths and the Blood War. They start trading soul larvae. That's sort of, if you're going by the canon Dungeons & Dragons night hag. They exist entirely to enter the dreams of good people. Good, upright. They're trying to just live their lives and not be dicks. And the night hag comes in and just sort of sits on them while they sleep, causing them to have nightmares, eventually leading them down paths of sadism and perversion.
Right? Sadism and perversion. The night hag is the kind of hag that'll eat a whole bag of Skittles and then act like she's going to spit in your face in your dreams.
Right.
Suck it up.
Right.
That bully.
That bully. I kind of think of the hag as being more magical. I think of like the witches and crones and the good ladies and the kindly ones and things like that. And they're more magical than physical.
Right.
But the fact that all of the hags are good melee combatants if you introduce them sort of at the upper end of where they should. So like I said, a sea hag or a green hag is a good opponent for a second or third level party. They might really mop the floor with a second level party, but I think by third level, players should have a memorable encounter with them, and maybe even not come away without some scars.
Right.
And so the night hag and the anise hag, et cetera, kind of continue that trend. Now, when you get 3 of them together,
oh, buddy,
is when you start getting that magical, mystical type hag that I kind of think of. And so 3 of them together, obviously their ability to cast from their cauldron is limited to them being within 30 feet of it, so there's limits on what they can do.
Yeah.
But if you're facing a coven of hags, you're going to want to make sure that you're just a bit extra careful. Obviously, taking out one of them is all you need to do to break their link with the cauldron and their ability to cast spells.
Right.
But until then, their ability to spy on you,
right,
to send minions after you,
yeah,
to make life miserable for the PCs is greatly enhanced because of their spellcasting ability.
Say you have a coven of hags, right? They realize that this is their source of power.
Right.
Okay, they're probably going to have intermediaries to go and do stuff for them, so they can sit there, they can scry, they can do their stuff. They don't really want to leave that base of power.
Right.
If they don't need to.
If they don't need to. No.
So if a party rolls up in there, I mean, aren't there going to be some challenges of attacking a coven in their lair?
Yeah, I mean, so you can imagine that there's going to be guardians there, maybe charmed creatures that are in the service of the hag. Any kidnapped victims that they have might be used against the party member in some way, either used as like human shields or magically compelled to fight the party.
Right.
So if I'm running a hag encounter like that and the party has been investigating things in the villages for a while and they've maybe made some alliances, then it might be a case of, am I going to make the party knowingly fight and have to overcome innocent villagers?
Right. Some of these people, the party might have been searching for some of these people the entire campaign.
Now they're charmed or somehow otherwise compelled to fight alongside the hags. This is in addition to the trolls and ogres and manticores and whatever else that the hags have allied themselves with in their environment. That's kind of what I would do. And then you have to deal with the fact that they're spellcasting. And most of those spells, might be more of the information gathering, reconnaissance type spells, long-term casting, or the like. But you can also imagine that the Coven has defensive spells prepared in the event, particularly if they've been like messing with the party for a while.
Right.
They will have the fireballs and the walls of force and the things that are going to make life difficult for the party.
Yeah, if you're talking about the climax, like we're reaching the end. Thinking about being a player going into that, where they have all those thralls, those people they've taken and brainwashed, whatever they're fighting us. And why wouldn't the hags just be dropping fireballs right on top of the villagers and the party? So then the party has to make a decision. Do you try to get these villagers out of harm's way? How do you do that? How do you get them out of harm's way?
They're trying to kill you.
They're trying to kill you while everything else is trying to kill you. It presents an interesting dilemma for players.
That's what I really like. Those are the moments in D&D where I really like to try to create situations, and it's not. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
And you do have to respect the decisions that the players are making, but you can put them in situations where the obvious course of action, the most expedient course of action, or the most predictable course of action comes with a real drawback.
Yes.
And then they can go, okay, well, we can either do it another way that we're either not prepared for, have never tried before, is going to take a lot more resources and circumvent some of those.
Circumvent?
I can't even say circumvent anymore now without circumvent.
Damn you, Arrested Development.
Arrested
Just
Development.
like you can never say bees anymore.
You can never
without
say
someone
bees.
at the table going, beads?
Beads. All right.
Bees!
So you can circumvent some of those drawbacks, or you try to get the villagers out as best you can. Do you have some non-lethal options on the table for really taking them out?
Or is it maybe, you assault, all of a sudden here's those 5 villagers, do you just grab them and run?
Right.
Grab them, run back,
Right.
recoup, regroup.
Once the hags are 30 feet away from their cauldron, there's not spellcasting. So
Exactly.
they are limited, and and so you can sort of snatch and grab and get out of there.
Yeah.
And that might be the thing that you need to do.
Maybe
and then you've
kite some of their henchmen.
guide some of their henchmen, and just a snatch and grab, get them and come out. And now you've upset the hags. They will come after you, and that's sort of the interplay of a campaign. There's your first 6 or 7 levels right there. A couple of weeks of adventuring, who knows? I mean, that's sort of how you would build a campaign. Obviously, that's kind of what I was doing with Razzle Sin. If you've watched watched our live play.
Yeah, I highly encourage all of our fans, if you haven't yet, watch it. It's fun. It's an exercise in frustration. Also, a bunch of experienced players breaking some cardinal rules.
Yes, there are some cardinal rules that get broken there. You know, and it is what it is. You guys, you know, I deliberately set up a very slippery enemy.
Yeah.
And a Night Hag is a great one for that because of their innate abilities. You throw on some Warlock levels, and it's even worse.
Yeah, and so, you know, but, I mean, how you use Razzle Sin, though, illustrates just how many different ways this creature can just fuck with the party.
Right,
I mean,
right. And that's really what...
The polymorph thing is just great. Turning an ogre into a squirrel so that you just snap its neck
So you
and
just
throw it
carry
at
it
the
around
party.
with you, and now the ogre's just there.
Never thought about that.
And so I think that you know, that's what I wanted to do with Razzle Sin. And like I said, if you haven't seen it or you're curious to kind of rewatch it, I was deliberately taking just a from the book monster, reading the lore entry that comes with it, and going, how can I extrapolate that into a larger campaign?
Right.
And the really beautiful thing about the 5th edition monster manual, and what I think it shares in common with the greater monster manuals like the 2nd edition monstrous manual, is that it is a gameable book. That it's not just a bunch of stats and they don't give you any context for them. It tells you, hey, this is how you use this monster. All of that lore text that's in the beginning is how you can create campaigns and encounters out of using this monster. And maybe you don't like the default lore.
Right.
Maybe Forgotten Realms isn't your thing, or generic D&D isn't for you. But even so, you can just read that and then let that spark your imagination and sort of like, okay, what's going to come after this? And I find that the hag sort of stands at the top. There's hags, dragons, liches. Those are the kinds of monsters that come with a ton of information and a ton of just interesting things that you can do to create a fun campaign for players. Whataburger, do you want to sponsor WebDM?
Yeah.
I will eat a HBCB on camera. The honey, I mean, it doesn't matter how careful you are, the honey butter is going to get everywhere.
Well, it's honey butter.
It's honey butter. But it's honey butter.
I will eat it.
I will
Something-
eat it.
something
I
should
will
be
eat
on
it.
camera.
I will. I don't give a shit.
You know what I like before I play a big game of Dungeons
I like to
and
grab my with a handful of dice with my sticky honey butter fingers.
That's how you live to die.
Yeah. I like to touch your friend's mini with my greasy.
I cast grease.
I go to pick up games at my favorite local gaming shop with an HBCB and just everything. Yep. I'll do that ad, Whataburger. And they can get that guy who does their Whataburger commercials. Cherry pie on the windowsill. That guy. He did
Have a
like,
nice
Have a nice. Yeah, I don't know who that guy is, but he did those
He has a thick. It's like he just got done eating an HBCB.
easily.
He's got that
Easily.
nice coating on his throat.
Do you remember the
at
show that was sponsored by Dairy Queen, and it was like Texas Backcountry Highways? I don't remember. It was like maybe a Texas Monthly thing, or I don't. It was like commercials that would appear between things. That reminds me of that guy.
This is Hags.
Hags.
Oh, so we're not good enough to clap anymore.
No, I don't want you to clap. I hate that clapping shit.
It's fine. It's fine. I thought we did good. I mean, it's just two hands.
I mean,
together.
I didn't know. I wasn't quite clear what the clapping was for. I'm sure it was like a signal of some
to
kind.
sync audio and
sync
sound.
audio and sound.
I'm just doing it anyway. I don't give a
I
shit.
wasn't rolling on your camera. See?
Hags.
I wish I had.
It's for hags.
Don't you see? You fool! You've ruined us.
All right, guys. We are rolling.